Welcome back to RC Truth Media. Now, Spencer Rapone, he is an Army lieutenant that was given an other than honorable discharge on June 18th after an Army investigation determined that he went online to promote a socialist revolution and disparage high ranking officers, and thereby had engaged in conduct unbecoming an officer. Rapone laid bare the lie. Although the lie often seems unsaleable, we must honor those like him who have the moral courage to speak the truth about war, even if the tidal waves of patriotic propaganda that flood the culture overwhelm the voices of the just. Our culture is just completely ruled by media and the propaganda that it just floods the media. Okay, whether it be on Fox, whether it be on CNN, if you watch Fox, you might people watching this channel might lean more towards conservative views, like me myself, but there's still the propaganda, patriotic propaganda on Fox. They want you to be a patriot and wave your flags high, and Donald Trump can't make a wrong move, and praise Trump like he's the god, right? Well, yeah, he can do wrong things, you know. He isn't 100% like they like to say. He does wrong things too, you know. Even though I like the guy, he's not perfect, and there is a deep state. We have to acknowledge that even on the right and the left, they are both teams of the same. And we're going to talk about this right now from this soldier. This is called the soldier's tale. The soldier's tale is as old as war. It is told and then forgotten. There are always young men and women, ardent for glory, seduced by the power to inflict violence, and naive enough to die for the merchants of death. The soldier's tale is the same, war after war, generation after generation, and it's Spencer Rapone's turn now. The second lieutenant was given an other than honorable discharge. Now, Rapone enlisted in the Army in 2010. He attended basic training at Fort Benning. He graduated from Airborne School in February 2011 and became an Army Ranger. He watched as those around him criticized their weapons. The rifle is the reification of what it means to be an infantryman, he said when I reached him by phone in Watertown, New York. You're taught that the rifle is an extension of you. It is your life. You have to carry it at all times. The rifle made us warriors, dedicated to destroying the enemy in close personal combat. At first, it was almost gleeful. We're a bunch of 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds. We had this instrument of death in our hands. We had power. We could do what 99% of our countrymen could not. The weapon changes you. You want to prove yourself. You want to be tested in combat. You want to deliver death. It draws you in. As much as life in the Army sucks, you start executing tactical maneuvers and battle drills. You get a certain high. It's seductive. The military beats empathy out of you. It makes you callous. He was distributed by what was happening around him and to him. When you get to RASP, which is the Ranger Assessment and Selection Program, you're told you not only have to understand Ranger culture and history, you have to adopt what's called an airborne ranger in the sky, he said. They make you go online and look at rangers who were killed in action. You have to learn about this person and print out a copy of their obituary. It's really unsettling, the whole process. Don't pick Pat Tillman. Rapone began to read about Pat Tillman, the professional football player who joined the Rangers and was killed in 2004 in Afghanistan by friendly fire, a fact that senior military officials, including General Stanley, McChrystal, who at the time was the U.S. commander in Afghanistan, covered up and replaced with a fictitious Hollywood version of death in combat with the enemy. Rapone watched the 2010 documentary, The Tillman Story, and would later read the 2006 Truth Dig essay, After Pat's Birthday, written by Pat's brother Kevin, who was in the Rangers with Pat Tillman, who had been in contact with Noam Chomsky, had become a critic of the war. In addition to lying to the Tillman family about Pat's death, the Army did not return and probably destroyed Pat's papers and diary. Pat Tillman showed me I could resist the indoctrination, he said. I did not have to let the military dehumanize me and turn me into something monstrous. When I learned how his death was covered up to sell the war, it was shocking. The military wasn't interested in preserving freedom or democracy. It was only interested in protecting the profits of those in power and expanding the U.S. hegemony. I was not a Hollywood freedom fighter. I was a cog in the imperialist machine. I preyed on the poorest, most exploited people on the planet. We were told to shoot, move, and communicate, he said of his ranger training. This became our entire existence. We did not need to understand why or the larger implications. These things did not concern us. Along with the ammunition, which fellow rangers cleared dwellings at night, he set up a blocking position. He watched as the rangers separated terrified men, women, and children, treating them as if they were animals. The rangers spoke of the Afghans as subhumans, dismissing them as hajis and ragheads. A lot of the guys would say, "I want to go out every night and kill people," he told me. The Rangers are about hypermasculinity, misogyny, racism, and a hatred of other cultures. His platoon sergeant and the hammer of Thor, a popular symbol among white supremacists, tattooed on his arm. The sergeant told new Rangers that if they saw something that upset them and wanted to speak about it, they were in the wrong effing place. Rapone left the Rangers to attend West Point in 2012. Maybe as an officer, he could make a difference, infuse some humanity into his squads of killers, but he had his doubts. When I started West Point in July 2012, I encountered a lot of similar themes that I noticed in Ranger Regiment, he said. Officers and NCOs relish the idea of being able to kill people with impunity. It's the young British soldier mentality we've seen for hundreds of years. It's hyper-masculine. Even female cadets have to assimilate themselves. Any display of femininity is considered weakness. This is combined with the structural racism. They still honor Confederate General Robert E. Lee at West Point. There's a barracks named after him. There's a portrait of him in the library in his Confederate uniform. In the bottom right of the portrait, in the background, is a slave. Rapone watched with growing anger as black cadets were kicked out for infractions that did not lead to the expulsion of white cadets. He majored in history, but he read outside of this curriculum, including authors such as Howard Zinn and Stan Goff, a former Special Forces Master Sergeant who had been in Vietnam, Haiti, Panama, Colombia, and Somalia, and who wrote Hideous Dream, a soldier's memoir of the U.S. invasion of Haiti. I realize we are the muscle for those with wealth and status, Rapone said. I was required to train cadets who had not passed a required event. At West Point, they'll maintain that hazing doesn't exist, he said, at least the kind that was around in the 50s or 60s, but it's still hazing. You're considered a plebe when you first get to West Point. You take out upperclassmen's trash every night. You're not allowed to talk when you're outside as a plebe. You have to keep your hands balled up and walk in position of attention. If you're caught talking to a classmate, you'll get in trouble. The worst part is that those who move on from their plebe year enforces the same dehumanizing behavior which they despised on the new plebes. He had experienced hazing in the Rangers too. New Rangers were forced to fight each other and do numerous push-ups, or were hogtied and their stomachs were smacked repeatedly. The hazing weeds out people who won't embrace it, he said. To resist total assimilation, a lot of people create an ironic detachment, but this ironic detachment is really another form of assimilation. It runs pretty deep. There was a guy in leadership position who tried to kill himself when I was overseas. There were cadets who committed suicide when I was at West Point, and others who tried to commit suicide. I spent 8 years in the army. I spent 8 years in the army. Suicide was a very tangible reality. A lot of suicides were the result of a combination of hazing and military culture, which in a sense is a form of hazing. Your drill instructor can't beat the shit out of you the way he used to, but the military still has methods to torture you emotionally. When he graduated from West Point, he was sent back to Fort Benning, where he had been a young recruit 6 years earlier. Every other Friday, a basic training class graduates, he said. I would see these buzz-cut teenage boys who had barely progressed out of puberty being sent into the meat grinder. It was unsettling. It was being trained to lead these guys, to tell them the mission we were doing was just right. I could not in good conscience do that. I searched for an opening. I looked for ways to leave or speak out. The United States is almost religious about its patriotism, he said. Military personnel are seen as infallible. You have someone like Secretary of Defense James Mattis, who is a bona fide war criminal. He dropped bombs on a wedding ceremony in Iraq. He's responsible for overseeing many different massacres in Iraq. Or General and former National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster. These people can't do any wrong because they've served. This reverence for the military is priming the population to accept military rule and a form of fascism or proto-fascism. That's why I felt even more compelled to get out. The public doesn't understand how aggressive and toxic military culture is, he went on. The military's inherent function is the abuse and degradation of other people. It is designed to be a vehicle of destruction. It's fundamental to the system. Without that, it would collapse. You can't convert the military into a humanitarian force, even when you use the military in humanitarian ways, such as in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina. The military trained soldiers to see other human beings, particularly brown and black human beings, as an imminent threat. Of course, the military prides itself on being apolitical, which is oxymoronic, he said. The military is the political muscle of the state. There are few things more dangerous than a soldier who thinks he or she doesn't have a political function. I want to implore other soldiers and military personnel, there's more to being a soldier than knowing how to fire a weapon, Rapone said. You can take a lot of what you've learned into society and actually help. At West Point, they say that they teach you to be a leader of character. They talk to you about moral fortitude. But what do we see in the military? I was binding I was blindly following orders. I was inflicting violence on the poorest people on earth. How is there any morality in that? That's right. Middle East, those people in the Middle East, there's 7 countries that have been taken out, and General Wesley Clark has detailed this. If you look up General Wesley Clark, 7 countries on Google, you can also see what their plan was in the Middle East to take out all these men, women, and children. This has been going on for almost 20 years now. When will this war end? You know, President Trump said he was going to get us out of Iraq and out of the Middle East, and we're still over there. And how many other countries in the world right now? At least we got out of the United Nations, and I do see some positive things happening in the near future. Thanks a lot for coming to this channel. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you again very soon. Have a great day.